Hello friends, welcome back to the channel. Before we get into today's video, I wanted to tell you that I'm now on Instagram. So head on over and let's connect. I'll mainly be posting about the books that I'm currently reading, have read, or want to read, but I will probably be sharing some candid posts and even share with you the movies that I'm watching because I'm a huge horror movie fanatic. So it's going to be all things horror and spooky, and I can't wait to connect with you. So come on over and give me a follow. What are you waiting on? So today's video is kind of bittersweet for me. It's the final cut of 2020 books I wanted to read, but ultimately they didn't make the list. When I first considered making YouTube videos, I had a list of like 56 books that I wanted to read and discuss, and while I could have carried on that plan, it would have probably taken me another year to complete, and by that time all these books would have been 2 years old, which is fine, but I went ahead and made the decision to shorten the list to just 30. Actually, it was probably 32 because I had 2 DNFs, and I wanted to actually read 30 complete books from 2020. So I shortened the list so I can move on to other things next year. So you may be asking yourself, well, Michael, what are your plans for next year? What's in store for the Boo and books? Well, we'll get into that in another video next month, so be on the lookout for that. But today I wanted to tell you about 9 stories you might be interested in reading, but that I no longer plan to read. It's a mix of horror and thriller, includes ghosts and witches, and yes, even creatures. So no one was safe. So let's get right into it. So the first on my list that didn't make the cut is going to be The Deep by Alma Katsu. And it's a historical fiction story set on the ill-fated Titanic, which sounded amazing. There's something mysterious going on the Titanic, something haunting. There are mysterious disappearances and sudden deaths. Then disaster strikes, as we all know. Years later, a survivor named Annie works as a nurse on the hospital ship Britannic and comes across an unconscious soldier, one she recognizes from the Titanic, but he couldn't possibly have survived the sinking, could he? She's like, what the hell's going on here? There's no way this dude survived. So this story really had the potential to capture my interest if it had been set completely aboard the Titanic the whole story, but apparently that's not the case because what happens aboard the Titanic in the story is only a small portion of the book. So if it had all taken place before the sinking, I would have been on board, but alas, I had to let go of this one. Sorry, Jack. So next is going to be Out of Body by Jeffrey Ford. It is a dark fantasy thriller in which a small-town librarian witnesses a murder at the local deli and begins suffering from sleep paralysis. Holding a dying girl in his arms has completely fucked this guy up. So much so that he starts what I think is astro projecting himself and starts seeing the town for what it is. It's filled with secrets and demons, probably not literally, but he can see all the town folks' secrets, I guess. He also discovers a serial killer who is somehow able to travel with him through his dreams. This one sounded really interesting and would have been a short read, but there were just too many other stories I thought might be better. So if you're into astro projecting, check it out. So the next one is going to be Year of the Witching by Alexis Henderson. It's a dark fantasy set in a religious Puritan village where some sort of mishap lures a young woman into the Forbidden Forest. And it's there that the spirits of 4 witches give her the journal of her dead mother, who was apparently involved or connected with the witches. Maybe she was a witch, I don't really know. But the journal is filled with secrets of the church, and she soon realizes that if her town is to change, it must start with her. So this one was high on my list to read, but I wasn't sure I could connect with the time period. Plus it's apparently book 1 of a series, and I really don't want to devote my time to that, so I just had to cut it. Next is going to be Crossroads by Laurel Hightower, and it's a story of a mother's loss and grief over the death of her son who died in a car accident. One day, while at the roadside memorial where he died, a small cut and a drop of blood falls to the ground, and later that night she thinks she sees his ghost outside her window. Woo! So I've really heard nothing but good things about this story, and it's sad to cut, but ultimately it just sounded really sad, and even if the story's really good, just didn't really want to go down that road right now, so I went left instead of right and just put it in my rear view. As you can hear the motorcycle revving outside. So next is a story called Night Train by David Quantick, I think. It's a science fiction horror story where a woman wakes up on a train. She's scared and alone with no idea how she got there. But this isn't an ordinary train. No, of course not. This is filled with the dead and strange, horrifying creatures with even stranger stories. So she must make her way to the front of the train to discover the truth about where she is, what has happened to her, and where they're going. This plot sounds fairly obvious. I don't think it's supposed to be a mystery that she's dead. I'm assuming she's dead. I mean, why else would she be among the dead, right? But I'm sure it had a few twists and turns along the way. I probably would have enjoyed it, but I didn't make the train. Had to go. So The Residence by Andrew Piper is another historical fiction piece centered on the 1853 presidential election of Franklin Pierce. That's interesting. While traveling to Washington, D.C., their train derails, and the only casualty is Franklin and Jane's son, Benny. Once the Pierces move into the White House, strange disturbances and ghostly visions overtake the mansion. Jane enlists the help of the Fox sisters to conduct a seance, and when they do, something horrific comes through and takes up residence in the walls. And if they're going to defeat this evil or these ghosts, they're going to have to confront their own grief. So I guess historical pieces are just not high on my list, considering, I got The Deep and The Year of the Witching and now The Residence. I need to read at least one of these kinds of stories at some point, but for now, I'm just going to leave this selection and move on with my life. So this next one is an interesting one. It was apparently published in 2014, so I'm not sure how it even got on my list. Maybe the paperback took that long to come out, I have no idea. But that's going to be Sleep Donation by Karen Russell. So this story is about a lethal insomnia epidemic that's affected hundreds of thousands of people. An organization called the Slumber Corps has risen to urge healthy dreamers to donate sleep for those in need. For 7 years, our main character, Trish, has recruited for the Corps, but her faith in the organization falters when she meets Baby A, who is the first universal sleep donor, and some mysterious dude called Donor Y. That's all I really know. This one was really hard to cut. It was going to be a short one, but it didn't have the best reviews, and it didn't really sound all that horrific, so I'm just going to sleep on it. So the 8th story cut is going to be We Hear Voices by Evie Green, and this is a debut novel about a boy who recovers from a mysterious flu pandemic and starts talking to an imaginary friend who makes him do violent things. And it's going to be up to his mother to keep the family together and discover the truth behind this imaginary friend called Delphi and to save her son. So there are a lot of subgenres in horror that I've not read about. The period pieces I spoke about earlier. Imaginary friends, I've never really gotten into that. So I really hated to cut this one, especially since it's a debut novel, but there are just too many other books out there that caught my attention, so we hear voices. So the last book I'm going to tell you about is called Fractured Tide by Leslie Lutz. It's a young adult thriller about a 17-year-old named Sia, whose job it is to take people out on scuba diving tours. They just, I guess they look around wrecked ships under the waters, not too deep, because, you know, these are just like tourists or whatever. But their boat is attacked by a mysterious underwater creature. It sinks, and Sia is the only one to make it to an uncharted, deserted island, which sounds phenomenal. But this island is not exactly what it seems. Supposedly, it's got some Lost vibes. I love that show. But soon other survivors start appearing, washing ashore, which gives Sia some hope, but secrets could destroy their chance of escape. So honestly, this one was probably the hardest to cut because I'm a sucker for creature stories, deserted islands. It's an epistolary story, which I loved about Max Brooks's Devolution. It's told in the form of journal entries from Sia to her father. But the plot sounds exactly like a movie on Netflix I watched not too long ago called Sweetheart. And I was afraid that I would just be comparing the two the whole time I was reading it. So ultimately, it really gutted me to cut this one, but I probably know how it ends anyway. So that's it. Those are the final cuts of 2020 releases from my long list of titles. Let me know in the comments if you've read any of these and what you thought about them, or if you plan to read some of them now. That would be great. I would love to hear from you. I appreciate you sticking around this far with me on my journey through YouTube, BookTube, and all that fun stuff. I think I've made like 21 videos now, which is crazy. It's coming up on 6 months since I've been on YouTube. Wow, it's really flown by, and I've enjoyed my time here with you guys, and I hope you have as well. So, with that being said, from here on out, in the next month or two, possibly this will end in January, but reading 2020 releases will be coming to an end very soon. I just got the last of the books that I'm going to read in the mail today. I will be sharing that on Instagram later, so come on over and see me there. Alright guys, so thanks for tuning in. Come back and see me next time, and until then, you know the words. Keep turning those pages. Bye.